Thanks everybody for joining us today. This is a great conversation we're going to have about the skilled trades, their importance to the workforce and economy, and how schools can make trade prep part of their CTE programs. Skilled trades require specific expertise and they focus on practical application, often in the form of hands-on work. You probably had that part of the definition in mind, but you may not know that skilled trades are present in every sector of the economy, each of the 14 career clusters. Understandably, we think of construction and advanced manufacturing roles, right? But they're in arts, entertainment, and design, financial services, energy and natural resources, healthcare and human services. And while traditionally you might think of specialized training after high school, which is still important. We're also seeing a really exciting shift where these crucial skills can be brought directly to high school students to get them started on that career learning journey. We're going to talk about that. We're going to introduce our partnership with Interplay Learning, an award-winning provider of online and VR training for the skilled trades, and this new solution, Edmentum Career Trade Prep, powered by Interplay, which expands our CTE offering with immersive job-ready training for the in-demand jobs of the present and future. This unique offering gives high school students access to learning that was once reserved for industry professionals in fields like aviation and the military. It's really great stuff. So now let's get to the conversation with our real experts here. I want to welcome in Edmentum CEO Jamie Candee and Interplay CEO Doug Donovan. Welcome, Jamie and Doug.
Hello.
Ross, thanks for having us.
Yes,
Yes.
this is it's great. I mean, there's been so much enthusiasm around this discussion in the skilled trades. We've just recently announced this partnership, and it's great to see it come to life. And so for folks out there who maybe are coming from our Edmentum audience, who know a little bit about us, but want to learn more about Interplay, Doug would love to start us off by having you tell us more about Interplay, the work you've been doing since your company's founding, and some of the impressive partners you've worked with, because there's a lot of good stuff there.
Yeah, all right. Well, thanks, Ross. So Interplay Learning, a software company with a singular focus from our inception on the electrical, mechanical skill trades worker and trying to bring the best in education technology to that area, which for the most part has been ignored for decades and decades. And so it was kind of refreshing in 2010, 2011, when we had this idea like, hey, can't we do some of the things that they do in the military, medical, aviation industries, bringing simulation to trades workers, bringing it to HVAC techs and electricians and plumbers and the like. And that's really been our calling card for the last decade plus, is a ability to take what has been traditionally something really challenging to train online and make it available to people entering the career, like the high school students we're going to be talking to and different students we'll be talking to with this partnership, and to the marketplace itself and the employers. And we're a little unusual as a software company in the ed tech world in that we actually started with the employers. We went to the employers and said, what do you need to support a new hire that probably is coming to you with little or no skills? And we actually built that content first. And we started using a lot of simulations and adding some depth to the content there to really solve for the problem, the skills gap for the employer. We did that for years and years. And it's only been in the last few years that we've said, geez, we've got this great solution that's not just industry recognized, but actually extensively industry used. I mean, you mentioned some of our great partners. I mean, we have everyone from the residential contractor down the street from your house, right? Sally's Heating and Air or whatever that is, all the way up through the largest facility maintenance company in the world, CBRE. So we sort of run the gamut with employers, and it's around all of these different skilled trades and, from maintenance through construction, et cetera. And the last couple of years, now we've been looking at how do we take everything we've learned there and bring it to the students and help be a part of the solution to create the next generation of tradespeople.
Yeah. Doug, I'd love to stay on that workforce readiness piece for a moment while you're touching on it. And when we look at the journey that students take through like the Edmentum career offering, right? We look at everything from discovery and discovering their preferences and attributes, exploring different career options, building durable skills that go kind of across jobs, deepening their learning, and then preparing for workplace success. And this partnership is especially exciting on that piece. through the experience that students get with applying their skills and knowledge. And this is something that has been raised as a pain point in all types of areas of the economy, right? White collar, blue collar, that the skills and knowledge that new employees have when they're
Yeah,
coming out of whatever their training was. It could be university, 2-year trade, is not necessarily corresponding with um,
Right.
their ability and know-how to do those things in the actual workplace, right? So it is a problem that we want to solve here. Can you talk more about that, about the real experience that students are getting and the way that they're able to do it through technology, right? And make it accessible to students who may be in places where they're not necessarily having particular equipment and facilities, but they really are preparing and getting the knowledge around, okay, when you're doing this in the real world, right? When you have a
yeah.
job, here's what's required to apply these skills.
Right, right. Well, part of the thing that gets us so excited about this partnership is the agility that y'all have at Edmentum, right? Some of the more traditional providers of education don't have this kind of agility, and the marketplace is demanding that. And so, for us to find the right partner to serve here, that was something we really considered, because as I mentioned, we started with the employer, so we know exactly what they need. And I can tell you what we built is very different than the traditional. If you were building a curriculum from ground zero, we'll, make it up. You might learn the third theory of electricity and, all this, but that's not really what you need the first day on the job at an electrical contractor. You need to know safety, you need to know some critical tools, you need some of the things that really matter in that workplace. So like our ability with our software, knowing what the employers need and be able to expose that to the students earlier. It's just, you talk about workforce readiness. We say a lot, like, you are ready to be a valuable employee on day one, the day you walk in there. You're not going to be a senior technician. Let's be realistic with what you're going to, where you're going to be in your journey, but you really should be valuable. And that's exciting for us in this partnership. And that's something, because of where we came from, it's pretty natural to us. It wasn't something we had to sort of force our way into just because of the origin.
Yeah. Yeah, Jamie, one of the things that stands out to me is specifically what the fields are that we are including and providing options to students around, right? So with this trade prep offering, there's 9 programs: electrical, plumbing, HVAC, appliances, facilities maintenance, clean energy, multifamily maintenance, residential construction, and solar. That's a long list, but the point is, it strikes me that a significant value that we can provide to students as an education company partnering with their schools and districts, right? And applying our know-how is not just giving them a wide array of options, which we strive to do in all of our offerings, but in really doing some curation of those options to make sure that they're aligned with fields that are in demand, where there's real economic opportunity, right? And ensuring that these are pathways that, once they align with students' interests, they're also leading them to where they're going to be able to have meaningful work, right? And what does it mean for students when they can pursue learning in actual high demand, in demand fields, which is something that we can't expect them to know that themselves, right? We do need to support them in that.
That's right. Well, first of all, I want to, Doug, thank you. We're super excited about this partnership. It means a lot to us, and we'll talk later as we get into more questions and discussion around just accessibility. And one of the things, excuse me, that we've really been challenged with at Edmentum is when we're working with our school partners, what we do really well is bring phenomenal curriculum instruction, accelerated learning to the marketplace. And we've built this very large, robust career learning strategy where we're largely focused on, we've got close to 200 CTE courses now, over 40 pathways, and we're getting a lot of traction. Students are taking these courses. And then it's well, what's next? And so by bringing trade prep by Interplay into this partnership and into this ecosystem, it's really giving our students and our educators access in a way that has never been available to them. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. I wanted to just start, I think I mentioned this to you when you and I were talking a while ago, but part of this is also very personal to me. So my father was in the trades his entire career, and the vast majority of my family We have a very large family, was also in the trades. And so my dad actually started out working in a manufacturing facility, specifically Ford, and then actually worked his way to being a stationary engineer, which is actually a boiler operator. And along the way, he actually got his HVAC certification. And what was really cool about watching my dad through that experience is we always had a livable wage. He really enjoyed that work because he was hands-on. He actually went back to higher ed, which is a trend that we're also seeing here in the US. When I was in kindergarten, my dad started his undergraduate program using the GI Bill. But what allowed him to actually further fund that and pursue his interests, he went back to college because he wanted to be a leader. And so he ended up being the leader of the boiler operators of a specific hospital system that he retired from. And so being able to see what my dad had to figure out in terms of how he navigated that, and now bringing those opportunities to students, and to your question, Russ, is like, for students to be able to have access to this while they're still in high school, and for an education system anywhere in the country to be able to figure out how to offer it. And then for these students to be able to graduate high school and go directly or near directly into employment and actually have the skills that employers are looking for. You mentioned that earlier. That is a huge benefit. And we're just hearing so much excitement already in the marketplace around this because there's such a gap and such an opportunity to do this really well. So, when we think about the students who are demanding, and we look at which courses are being leveraged, and when students go through our career exploration courses, even starting in middle school, there's a lot of excitement around these different types of careers. And so being able to offer this trade prep is going to get them that much closer post-graduation to being employable and actually going into these employers that you've been talking to all these years, really building out these programs. So we think it's incredibly exciting. It's not something that's happening at scale right now in the industry. And we believe that this partnership is going to make it far more accessible than anyone has had prior.
Yeah, I'll add a couple things there. Number one, you name those 9 categories, like they're in every community, right? This is not, advanced manufacturing is great, but if you don't live within, commutable time to a factory, like you can't participate in that.
Right.
These jobs that we're talking about are in every single community, and they offer all kinds of pathways. Like your father, Jamie, had a pathway with a big company. He could build skills, bigger wages, et cetera, and had pathways inside of that big company. Somebody else down the street from you might have started a small plumbing company, and it might have been out of his or her truck. And now they, 10 years later, they might have had 15 trucks and, really been an entrepreneur, or they might have run a nice business with 1 or 2 trucks and that's it. So like the flexibility, that the pathways here are really phenomenal. And let's not get too deep into it, but it's a shame the last couple decades how we really started to focus so much on college for every student all the time, et cetera. I think we've done a bit of a disservice here, and the skills gap obviously shows that. And so I think people are starting to wake up to how powerful these jobs are, how they're in demand in every community, so people can stay, in the hometown and the place that they want to stay. And it's exciting to be a part of this. And with Edmentum's reach, I think we're just going to get to touch a whole lot more kids.
That's right.
And you both referenced the access piece, which is a really critical part of this, right? Despite there being widespread knowledge that the skilled trades are these high impact fields, there are challenges to bringing them to K-12. Often it's the cost, the scalability. I also think, like, broadly of the CTE programs, one of the things that is really valuable about them is that while these fields are present in all communities, like you said, Doug, also there's opportunities for students to engage in learning about fields that might not be predominant in their community, that ones that they wouldn't necessarily typically have on site if it's not an industry that is really heavily represented, right? But to say I'm really interested in that, I wouldn't be able to learn that locally, but I can learn it through these online programs. And I know that if I want to pursue that, I can go to an area where that's an industry, right? There's a lot of different things that virtual and online options can present, giving students access to developing skills that otherwise just for a lot of districts would be out of reach, because they either don't have the facilities or the equipment, right? Or
That's
they
right.
just don't have the local representation of expertise, or So can you talk more about, and I think you both have a lot to say about this, the opportunity that's presented when we are bringing these skilled trades through simulation, through innovative methods, to make sure that I could, and geography and other factors are not limitations to students really getting to learn what they want to learn.
When I've traveled around and I've seen a lot of the different career centers. I've seen amazing facilities set up specifically in communities that we're looking, so a big auto manufacturing facility goes into the community and they give a big grant, right? And then the high school sets up this amazing facility. That's a very, very small percentage of the time that you see the funding go into that type of facility where then students are actually able to like go through apprenticeships and like fully apply knowledge and learning in a hands-on. The vast majority of kids have no access to anything that we're talking about. And when you talk to districts across the country, every single one of them, districts, charters, private schools, every single one of them wants to offer this type of programming, but they've traditionally only thought about it as it must physically be accessible. And what's really cool, and I'll let you talk about this, Doug, like your software, the simulations, the experience, second to none. And so when you can show what's possible in a virtual environment for these specific trades and to simulate the skills you must be able to learn on the job and to be able to do that at a very, very low cost that is available to all, that's game changing for kids. Right now, you're opening up a whole world of possibilities that were only afforded to very, very few kids who got lucky enough that Ford or some other large manufacturing facility moved in and then wanted to dump a bunch of money into the school system to get these kids ready. Now we're actually opening up the doors of possibility, not just for the Fords and the large, but to your point, also for the local small businesses who are in desperate need to fill these roles and do not have a labor force to fill it. So, when I talk about access, and just that experience of being able to like understand what these jobs would be like before you have to go try to find one, I just think it's incredibly exciting. And that is, for us, one of the number one reasons that we're doing this is because the market is begging for it. There's no real way to do it physically. And quite frankly, you don't have to anymore because technology is caught up in a lot of ways to be able to afford the same experience without having to, pump millions of dollars from grant funding into facilities to replicate the physical experience. So I'll turn it over to you to talk maybe a little bit more about your experience.
I think that's an important point. I'd even add, like, even in that community, that rare community that has that incredible physical lab, like the kids still start with digital. They do.
That's right.
Everyone's going to start with digital with, whether they're ordering a pizza or finding a date, right? So like the same thing with a career, they're going to start digital. And so like to have presence in that so they can see what this job would look like and feel like in that environment, really already you start in a place where they are. And then for those people listening who haven't seen this stuff, these point of view immersive simulations look like video games, right? So again, a word that you quickly associate with youth and students. So they look like video games, but instead of, a shoot 'em up situation, it's a troubleshoot a heat pump or install a solar panel, et cetera, in a video game like environment. So it engages them immediately. Now, we've said, for those who, don't have the opportunity to have a training facility, like effectively, we have a $30 million training facility in a digital setting, right? And you may have VR if you're lucky enough to have virtual reality. All of our simulations work in virtual reality, and that's incredibly powerful. Most do not. And that's okay, because we actually deliver the exact same experience, or at least content experience, on any device, right through your browser or right through a tablet, et cetera. So we recognize, Ross, you talked about accessibility, like we knew accessibility was critical. So our ability to deliver across all those devices was to match that, we needed to do that. And so, yeah, to bring these careers to life and really get them actually learning in the field right out of the gate is way more interesting for them. Watching students connect it, like I've done, blended training where they come in and then they do the digital, and I'd see them, they would come in and they would do something, a digital, let's say it's a split residential AC, and they would do the simulation in on a flat screen, go home that night, come back and they say, hey, Doug, I have one of those outdoor units right outside back of my house. I walk by it every day. I never knew what it was. And like, so they could connect immediately to what these jobs were. They weren't just reading some textbook about the refrigeration cycle. They were actually seeing it and connecting that 3D world that we've given them with the world they live in every day.
Yeah. How does the virtual model of trade prep make it more of a possibility to keep up with the evolution of trends, technology, innovation, right? These fields, I think, are very durable as far as the demand for them. And yet within them, right, when you're dealing with devices and
Yeah.
technology, there are things that are changing and it's important to keep up.
Yeah, I mean that's the beauty of being a software company, right? Like it's a pretty easy iteration process to both either change something, like for example, we won't get too deep, but in the HVAC world, there's a big change. Refrigeration, like the type of refrigeration you can have is changing by federal law. And like that's not a situation that a lot of people could handle. In a digital situation, it's really easy to make that change. You add a little extra education, maybe you change some art, etc. Or when something becomes really like high flying, ductless AC units, which you've seen, like they sit up on the wall here and quietly, like those didn't exist 10 years ago. Now they're everywhere. And so you had to take a lot of seasoned vets and train them. And so we had to build that content. So that student coming in is getting sort of the best and the most recent and relevant training because of our ability to rapidly iterate and rapidly add.
Yeah.
Just to add to that, what I love about just the synergies between our two organizations is from the digital perspective, that's also exactly what we do at Edmentum is, you could launch these career programs, these CTE programs, and in the historical ways you'd use textbooks and there was, just a lot of sort of antiquated ways. And with digital, right? So as industries change their requirements, you then work that into your software. We go all the way back to start with the curriculum, right? And in seconds, right, we can change digital curriculum to meet those new requirements, training standards, whatever it might be, in a way that you can't when you're using the more traditional methods. And so being able to really stay agile and with, the kind of how these professions and how the software, the technologies, the tooling, all of those things are evolving at such a rapid rate. Being able to partner with digital providers like the both of us to offer these programs is going to enable you to stay agile within your organization and your communities to make sure that these students are getting the most current training that is available.
Yeah. Jamie, one of the critical things we are always talking about in K-12 is relevance, right? And I
Yeah.
think it's certainly a through line in the trends and prioritization of workforce development and CTE programs at the federal level and in states across the country, but we also talk about it with respect to all other subject matter. And I really do feel that when we are introducing career pathways, understanding of career options for students, and helping to make school more relevant in that way, that it also can help them see more relevance in all of their learning because
Yes.
they're seeing school is being designed for them, right? Like there's two ways to go about establishing relevance. One is to incorporate programs that students want and feel like are relevant. And the other way is to put the effort into making sure they understand the relevance of what they have, right? Whether it's math, English, career learning. Um, I'm wondering if you could talk some about the other indirect benefits students might experience other than I'm learning about X career and I'm developing skills for that career path and it's leading me there, right? We've talked a lot about that, but the other things that might happen or might occur that are beneficial in their schooling overall.
Yes. So if you haven't been to Edmentum's research page, you can go there and you can see some very specific research that I'm going to refer to now. So we've done a lot of research and studies on the relevance, right? And so when you bring career learning, and especially when you bring programs like this into your school system, there's a couple things that we see happen. First of all, we continue to have a persistent and catastrophic issue in this country with chronic absenteeism. So the rates have not come down post-COVID and they were bad pre-COVID and they were bad pre-COVID anyway, in terms of the number of students missing a very consistent amount of school on a regular basis. And so when you implement these type of programs, What it does is it increases student engagement. So students are now coming to school because they're excited about this opportunity to learn something outside of core instruction. So we know chronic absenteeism goes down, number one, and number two, we know that graduation rates go up. And so what's not happening is losing the students who have no desire to go on to a four-year college or university, who make the decision maybe for financial, economic reasons or other. Well, if I'm not going to go to college, then why am I going to even bother staying in high school? And so we really see a very strong correlation to the improvement in graduation rates. And we have numerous case studies on our website to support that. So those are some of the initial. The other piece of this is, there's a mental health and a wellness aspect of this that right now, traditional education, not all kids feel like they belong. And they also feel the pressures of their home life, if in fact they are someone in their family who is responsible for financial contribution. That is really hard to do when you are asked to go to a traditional school setting, sit in school from 7:30 a.m. to 3 p.m., and then you're supposed to have homework right after that. There are millions of kids in this country that have to work, and sometimes have to work more than just the part-time hours available to them. So what programs like this do, and when you bring Interplay and Edmentum together, what's really cool about this is not only are they learning about potential careers, but now they get to apply, they get to simulate with this solution. And that is going to keep kids really excited. And it's also going to help them see that if they stay in high school, they can graduate high school, they can sit for certification if it is required. They're establishing and acquiring these skills that are necessary, and they can go on to have phenomenal careers where they will be able to effectively provide for their families. I was just in a school district in Alabama last month, and I got to see what was happening. They run a very large virtual program in this district, and part of the virtual program is there is a career academy. And that a career academy, and I'm actually hoping, Doug, that we can bring Interplay into the mix. We did get to bring it up without effectively saying who it was, because it wasn't official yet. But they got very excited about it. And so I know our team has already talked to them about it since we've announced. But what this district was doing, they have a waiting list. So when I was down there last month for next school year, because they've offered this career academy where students are now taking CTE courses about that are part of their graduation requirements, going through full pathways. They have had the community come in and help set up some of the experiential and simulated learning experiences. This will just be the icing on the cake. For next school year, they already had a wait list of over 400 students for high school. This is not a massive community or school district. This is a mid-sized community, and they have hundreds of students that are on the wait list. And what's cool about this program is kids can elect to go to that virtual school and career academy full-time or part-time. So this is the power of opening up the flexibility and creativity that we're seeing our school partners, school systems do across the country. And we think by bringing the Interplay partnership in, it's going to open up even more doors for students and create that flexibility and that relevance that we know is so critical.
Yeah, I'm wondering what you both think about how this type of program, works in combination with industry partnerships, apprenticeship programs, right? The other types of workforce readiness learning that some states are really emphasizing, right, with their apprenticeship programs, or some districts are really good with their industry partnerships, and that it's not an either or, right? That there's real benefits to doing all parts of it, but would love to hear what you've seen as far as successes that have worked, or just, your overall thoughts on how these things are in combination as part of a comprehensive program. Doug, I'll let you jump in
It's a
first.
good question. And it's a little dangerous in that by domain and by state, there's sometimes a whole different set of rules, right? A plumber in Texas might be very different than what's required to be a plumber in Florida or New Jersey. So you have to be a little careful with generalizations here. But I'll just say in concept, a couple things going on. And often when you're in a secondary situation, you're in a pre-apprenticeship program, you're getting hours. In some cases, those hours actually will count towards what's called related technical instruction, RTI, which is a critical part to an apprenticeship program that you have to do. Let's say you're doing 2,000 hours in the field, the next number of hours, in a classroom or on an online situation. So in a lot of cases, this content will count actually towards an apprenticeship program. And it depends on the employer and the sponsor. And that's why I'm careful to not generalize and say this is true. But know that, because of, again, reminder where we came from and where we've been with the employers. And so Interplay ourselves we're actually a sponsor for hundreds of apprentices. And in some cases, we're actually just the RTI of apprenticeship programs for employer sponsors. So we're very much mixed. And in some cases, we are the pre-apprenticeship hours that count, depending by state. So know that wherever you are and however you're consuming this, there's been some thought put into like what we're doing and why we're doing it. And know that like you're getting these kids on the on-ramp, on the best on-ramp they can, given where they're sitting and given what they're pursuing. I hope that wasn't too general. I hope it gives you a sense, but we know this earn learn thing is not going away. Jamie talked about her father, starting some classes. That was probably more rare back then, right? Like people stayed in their work environment. Now we see a lot more earn and learn, and we're very much a part of that. And we'll meet that at different points in people's careers.
Yes.
Yeah.
The only thing I'd add to that, Russ, is, one of the things that we hear from districts, because what we're talking about is relentlessly local. So whether it is how do we offer CTE programming, what employers are in the community, from an education perspective right now in K-12, our standards, what it means to graduate, a lot of decentralization, meaning the states are now making far more decisions and spearheading many more educational initiatives versus the balance between federal and state that we've seen in decades prior. And so because of that, you're talking about school systems that do not have significant amount of funding, and certainly what they're not doing is their staff is not out trying to build relationships with every employer in the community. So the way that Interplay has approached this work and the process actually should give them a lot of confidence in terms of how we're providing the programs, in that you will not have to worry about going and talking to every single employer that your student potentially ever could want to work for. This programming and this process will actually help them flow through, and the work that they will do and whatever they have left with their apprenticeship, the certification, whatever is required within that state, they will be set up, generally speaking, to be in a good position versus having to start all of that post high school graduation, which would take them a lot longer. So.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting because we've seen like some surveys and data recently from employers saying they want at least 3 years of experience for entry-level position. I'm like, well, it's a catch-22, right? You can't get the job unless you have experience. You can't get experience unless you have a job. But in this case, we're saying the on-the-job training is still important. You still learn a lot, but you don't have to wait until you get to the workforce to get some experience. You can start getting learning. It's not all about what you're doing, whether in your apprenticeship, an internship, but when you're full time, that you can be combining that knowledge to your benefits, and then continuing that learning as you get into the workforce, right? Continuing to sharpen your skills, get better at your trade. But it really is addressing a very real trend that's happening, and understanding that for students to have opportunity, they need to have all of this presented to them.
Well,
Yeah.
I'll interrupt there a little, Ross. That's probably not as accurate, that statement that someone, an entry level needs 3 years in the trades. In the trades we're talking about, they are so hungry for ambition, and a little like ambition showing up and you did some work, right? Like, oh, look, I
Yeah.
did the Interplay training. I've got the Interplay certificate. I know what a multimeter is. I can talk basic safety. I know I can point on that shelf what tool is what. Like if you're showing that ambition and appetite, you're not going to have any trouble getting that interview and probably getting the job, assuming you communicate that, because they've recognized the 17-year-olds are not tinkerers as much as they used to
Right.
be. They're not little mechanics. Like, imagine Jamie's dad was changing
That's right.
oil at age 14, right? And like, that just doesn't happen anymore, right? We've separated those worlds a lot. And so they've recognized where they got to find these students, and they got to train them. And so, these graduating students, if they show a modicum of commitment and some basic skills, they're gonna be in a very good position to get a healthy entry-level career going.
And one
Excellent.
of the
Yeah.
things we've tried to do, Doug, to address that, I agree with you, is we've gotten very, very serious around incorporating durable skills. So what we once thought of as soft skills, but when you talk ambition, right, and leadership and critical thinking skills and all of those, we don't effectively teach those in K-12. Like great teachers are trying to teach them all the time, but it's not really woven through our curriculum standards or the things that we're required to teach upon graduation. And we're trying to change that right now. And so what we're trying to do as part of our started in our middle CTE courses, now it's in our high school CTE courses, we're going to incorporate it into other core courses, is bring in more application of those durable skills so that we can help you, you know, if you're going to go and acquire a handful of these skills necessary to go be an HVAC technician, now you got to also know how to apply, how to carry yourself really well when you do that interview because you haven't had a job yet. And so there's this whole sort of continuum that we're talking about that's pretty exciting in that we also want to help kids learn those skills because they're going to need it. And I think something like, you'll know this statistic better than I, but I think the last that I looked, there's like over 400,000 current HVAC job openings right now in the United States, which is like crazy to think of. And I've personally experienced that because we were trying to get some assistance and we had to wait like 3 weeks for an appointment in our community. And so like, this is like amazing timing and like the demand is so high. And so how do we get them as ready as possible to be immediately employable leaving high school?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's exciting because there's been chatter about this for, 5+ years, and now we're really seeing some good action.
Yep.
Students and parents are recognizing, you talk about durable skills. I love talking about durable careers, right? These are especially that you're talking in a world of AI where everything feels like, oh, what's going to happen in 5 years? Like, well, I tell you what's not going to happen is your AC is not getting fixed by some, AI device anytime soon. So these are really durable careers. So that's what, nice place to be able to support the kids on ramping into them.
Yeah, high and increasing demand, right? Well, it's been wonderful talking to you both. Eventually, I have to let you get back to other work, I'm sure. So I think this is a great place for us to tie it together is, we reference this a lot. Gen Z has been nicknamed the tool belt generation because of this interest in the skilled trades, but we've also referenced these variety of paths to college and career, and that it's not strictly linear or one direction, and it's not necessarily either or. And I think there's something to be said about how access to the comprehensive CTE programs not only helps students become prepared for those careers, but also provides them with insight into making the best decisions about their post-secondary path, whatever that may be, how the learning they're getting. Maybe this is the thing that they end up doing for their entire career. Maybe it's a component. I'll throw out one that relates to what you were both just talking about, that a lot of those open jobs in HVAC, I think you referenced the 4,000, right? In a lot of cases, those are not just open.
400,
Or
400,000.
100,000, right?
It's
I knew
massive.
4,000 didn't sound right. But that those open jobs in a lot of cases represent open businesses, entrepreneurship opportunities. There's people who own their own business, they're retiring. Maybe they have kids that went in, they're not passing the business down because their kids went into another line of work. And is somebody going to buy my business or do I just retire? And there's a lot of people who are not even involved in trade work that are looking at these as opportunities, but why shouldn't it be an entrepreneurship opportunity for somebody who has that training, who wants to be an owner operator, right? So it's not, and there's ways to get, education on the business side and to be able to do more than one thing. That's just one example, but that these are really, there's a lot of opportunity out there for kids once they have earlier exposure to this, once they really understand what these fields are about, build the skill set, that they can make a decision and say, okay, you know what? I want to get more training here. I want to go into a 2-year program. I want to get, a college education on this, but I also want to combine it with this knowledge, right? But you two are the experts. So I want you to both share from your perspective, some of the ways that it just really supports that better perspective for kids when they're coming to their high school graduation. They've had this coursework, they've been informed, and now they can really look at their future and say, what's my next step? But not only what's that, but what might come after that, right? What are the different things I can do now and I want to do? And I don't just feel like it has to be this or it has to be that. Doug, I'll let you jump in and then Jamie can wrap it up.
Yeah, I mean, like staying real close to the skills, and then we'll go broader, which is the electrical mechanical world is not going away. And if you build some foundational skills in electrical mechanical, and I've actually been advocating for years, I don't think we'll ever see it like a pathway starting in ninth grade that's a little more electrical mechanical heavy. It's almost like a major leaving a high school, similar to the way they do in Europe. Not necessarily true, like declare your profession at age 14, but like let's build a set of skills that are really transferable. And we already talked about, you hit on it, you can be the entrepreneur, the local entrepreneur, you can be the engineer, go on and get your master's in engineering, but also have that foundational electrical mechanical how it works. So these things are really limitless, and so it's exciting to get it in the kids' hands sooner. And then the other thing I'll say broader is, and we hit it earlier, is like the applicability of that education and how it, where it shows up in their work is much more immediate. And I think what that actually does is raises the value for education and the commitment to continue to educate. So 5 years into your career, you say, I did that online learning or more traditional academic learning, and look how it, led me to a better career and better life. Now I'm going to do that again. I'm going to pursue that again because I've seen the results of where education leads to opportunity. And so like the last thing you want is a kid getting out of high school and just feeling like, good, I'm done with that learning thing. And I think this actually brings it to life for them, that will make them lifelong learners.
I could not agree more. I would add, just putting the political lens on this, this is one of the very few things right now in education and workforce where there is bipartisan support. And so when you think about that, you say, okay, well, if we have policymaker support and you're seeing things like graduation requirements, the portrait of the graduate, look at Indiana as I think a really great example of amazing work that's happening there. And that is in partnership with the state legislature and the State Department of Education and workforce. And that's a really good state example. What I would say is important to wrap this up is a call to action, which is if you leave this video or this call thinking about, okay, well, this is really hard to implement. If you're thinking that way, it is because you're thinking of the more traditional way to implement these programs where you've got huge CapEx that you've got to come up with. You've got to figure out the staffing. You've got to figure out the space. It can be overwhelming for many communities and many systems. We are not talking about that. We are talking about infinite scale, much lower cost. We've done the work between our two companies to spend millions of dollars building these amazing tools, the curriculum, Interplay. Bringing that together now allows you to implement at scale in ways that were never afforded prior because it was so expensive, it was so localized, it was so difficult to get it off the ground. So I think, from an application perspective, you should leave this understanding that you can get these programs up and running very, very quickly. And we obviously want to be helpful with that, including, the courses that we take early on. We have state certified CTE teachers to offer all those courses, so you don't have to worry about the staffing either. You just have to start to think more innovatively and creatively about how you do this in a digital world. And by the way, your kids want this. They are living in a digital world, and it is not a heavy lift for them. So, that's sort of the bipartisan political call to action. The last thing that I would say is when we are all talking about college affordability issues, we could have endless conversations about that. One of the more interesting trends that we've been watching very closely is the number of students who are graduating high school, going directly into the workforce, in many cases, the trades. And then, like you said earlier, Doug, and I think Ross, you said this too, and then electing after, like what my dad did. He did it because he wanted to get a degree in management so he could go lead people in this hospital system as boiler operators, then making the choice, because now you've built a career, you do have the financial stability to then go into a higher ed institution for a very specific next step. So the conversation really needs to be an and, not an or. It can be an or, but it should also be an and. And I invite everybody to start to get very, very serious. There's a lot of policy. There's a lot of discussion moving around the country around this. Now's the time for application so we can really serve these kids.
It's amazing timing for district leaders, as you referenced, when there's an appetite everywhere for it, right? When it's a bipartisan, policy and legislative appetite, and from leaders and students and educators, where everybody is interested in the same thing. No better time to be able to really implement high impact programs. So, viewers, if you want to learn more, you can visit the Career Connected Learning Solutions page on edmentum.com. We'll put links below where you can learn about a variety of resources and learn more about this. Jamie and Doug, it's an exciting partnership, and I want to thank you both for being here and thank you for your leadership on this.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Doug. Really appreciate the partnership. We're excited to get started.
Yeah, me too. Thank you both.